Hello friends, today I'm talking about what CPTSD recovery looks like. I get asked this so often in my coaching practice. People will say, Michelle, what does it look like and how long does it take? So I thought I would explain the stages and basically tell you guys what I wish I knew when I was starting out on my healing journey. Okay, so with that in mind, let's get started. For those that don't know me, my name is Michelle. I'm a life and relationship coach, and I'm the founder of the Thriver School of Transformation, which is a monthly membership where we meet weekly live and we learn how to put everything I talk about on this channel into practice. So if that's interesting for you, make sure you check out the links in the description box below. So the healing journey. I would say the very beginning of healing, and actually this isn't healing, this is just what it's like pre-healing, okay? Before you even start your healing journey, the majority of people lived most of their life thinking that they were the problem. You were probably convinced that there's something wrong with you, you're defective, that everything that's going wrong in life is somehow all your fault, and that all the behaviors that you're seeing in the other person are somehow your responsibility, okay? For a long time, you stay stuck in that. And you were probably trying harder and harder to please until finally, thankfully, you stumbled across information that helped you to know that there's something wrong with this person. And it feels really good to fall into that information because for a long time, you knew in your gut that something was off, but through gaslighting and coercive abuse, emotional, psychological manipulation, everything was always twisted to make it look like it was your fault. So when you finally realize that, okay, everything you thought was right, was true in the sense that you knew that it was wrong, that these behaviors were wrong, now you have names for behaviors that you've been dealing with for a long time. I had a client recently tell me, Michelle, I didn't even know these behaviors had names. I knew that I was in repetitive relationships that were similar. They all had something in common. They all seemed to act the same way. She's like, but I didn't know what it was. So I had my own little names for those behaviors. And when she finally stumbled on the fact that these behaviors really do have names, it was just so eye-opening and so validating. Right? So that's what happens next. You start gaining information that helps you to come out of the fog. You're still not healing yet, okay? Right now you are learning why you've been suffering, right? You're getting the pieces to the puzzle that are explaining what has been going on in your life. So once you get through that period, most people wind up detoxing themselves from anyone that is destroying them emotionally. In one way or another, whether it's you become of age and you're able to leave home, right, from your toxic parents, or you're in a relationship and you realize that this is destroying you and you put boundaries down, which can either cause the person to discard or you realize that your life isn't safe with this person and you leave the relationship, right? That's what usually happens next. And real healing can't really start until you get to that phase, because it's almost like if a plant is in soil that doesn't have the nutrients to maintain its life, and you're watering it and you're giving it sunlight and you're hoping that this plant flourishes, well, eventually it's going to be a losing battle because the soil doesn't have the nutrients to sustain that life. So it's the same thing with the relationship. You finally realize that this relationship doesn't have the nutrients to support a healthy, reciprocal, non-abusive dynamics. So most people wind up, discarding or being discarded at this point. That's when real healing can begin. And I'm going to be honest, when we get to this stage, I don't think people are always ready for the depth of healing that they have to go through, because the focus up until this point has been the other person, looking at the other person, getting your life away from somebody that's trying to emotionally suffocate you. So when you finally get out, it's not until that moment that you realize all the damage that has been done, and you have to work through undoing that damage. And it's then that you realize that you have complex PTSD. It's very much like somebody that's at war. While they're in battle, they're not exhibiting signs of PTSD. They are doing everything they have to. They're fulfilling their assignments exactly how they need to. It's when they leave that situation and they come home and they no longer have to be in survival mode that they fall apart. And it's almost like the body and the brain don't know how to turn off the survival mode. That's what happens with complex PTSD. You leave the relationship and you're thinking life is going to be great because I'm not going to have to be abused anymore. And suddenly your brain and your body wind up acting in ways that are challenging. And so that brings me to the first step of recovery, or the first level, I should say, of recovery. The first level of recovery is noticing your symptoms, coming to realize how your brain, your mind, your body is behaving. You start realizing the side effects of what you went through. And I'm going to read this list of symptoms and you can evaluate how many you've had. And keep in mind that it's not an all-inclusive list, but it's just to give you an idea of some of the symptoms that people display when they start realizing they may have PTSD. Reliving the experience through flashbacks or having emotional flashbacks, or reliving the experience through dreams or nightmares. Not being able to feel your emotions, so you feel very numb. Dissociation, and this could include disconnecting from others, but it also includes being or feeling disconnected from yourself. Negative alternations in mood, like you're flipping from one negative mood to another. It's very challenging to be able to control your emotional states. You have problems relating to others, social anxiety, problems in relationships, a strong negative self-perception, such as feeling worthless or defeated, hyperarousal, feeling angry, irritable, having sleep issues, hypervigilance, such as feeling on constant alert, or being very sensitive to smells and noise and light. Avoidance, so you try to avoid anything or anyone that winds up triggering you. Some behaviors that show up as symptoms are needing validation, constantly seeking approval, analyzing people or self, being overly nice, people-pleasing, alcohol, obsessing about people who wronged you, having impulsive behavior, feeling strong feelings like blame, resentment, rumination. And honestly, the list can go on and on. There are a lot of symptoms of complex PTSD. And so you start to notice all these things going on inside of you, right? In order to calm them, this part of the recovery, honestly, it's about shifting the focus from the other person, right? Because up until this point, it was all about the other person. But once you get to this point, healing really begins when you start focusing on self. And the strongest thing that you can do at this point is not think about the other person. In all honesty, one of the most effective things you can do at this point is focus on things that can help you to balance or gain regulation again in your brain. Okay, there's a lot of different things. I've made many different videos, but getting brain regulation at this point is vital, because until your brain feels safe enough to get you out of survival mode, you won't be able to move to the next stage. Okay, so the first stage is all about getting your body and your brain regulated again. Once that takes place, right, and now your body and your brain are regulated enough and calm enough that you can go one layer deeper, which is noticing the disordered thinking patterns that have become well-worn pathways in your mind due to what you've lived. Okay, so the thinking patterns may be things like, I'm not good enough, I'm gonna fail at everything, why bother, I don't matter. There's all these thinking patterns that are driving the feelings and the actions or lack of actions that are keeping you feeling like you're still stuck. In the Thriver School of Transformation, when one of the members gets to this place, gets to this spot, they'll often say things like, you know, I noticed that I always did this behavior, and now that I'm slowing down enough, I'm realizing the thought that has always pushed that behavior. So that's the next layer, is you notice the thoughts and the beliefs that are driving your behaviors that keep you in those symptoms that I mentioned. The next step is really challenging, because what you start to notice as you're noticing these thoughts that are trying to keep you in the same behaviors that you've been stuck in for a long time, you'll feel at war with yourself. Okay, so for example, you may want to develop self-love. So you're thinking, I love myself. But there's these thoughts that are pushing you to stay in the belief, I'm not worthy. So every time you want to exercise self-love, you'll begin to notice your own mind trying to prevent you from going there. And the reason for this is because our brain likes habit. Our subconscious mind is a habit mind, and while our conscious mind can change quickly, our subconscious mind, it takes time to start working through and upgrade a belief. So its job is to keep your beliefs your reality. So if you're starting to operate outside of a belief that you've had for a long time, your mind then is trying to work against you to keep you in alignment with that belief. So this part of recovery is about rewiring your subconscious thoughts, your subconscious beliefs, and upgrading them to more healthier beliefs. As you begin to kind of override the negative beliefs, you're kind of peeling it back, right? It's like an onion. You're peeling it back, and now that you're seeing those beliefs, you're analyzing them, you're trying to change them to more empowering beliefs. Every time you start going in the direction of the positive, you will get a glimpse of your core wound. Okay, it's not till now that you actually get a glimpse of that core wound. And when I say core wound, I'm talking about a wound that was so detrimental to your self-image. The wound is probably, I'm not enough, I'm bad, right? I'm worthless. The wound caused you to have such a distaste for self, because whoever inflicted that wound, that's basically what they made you feel. And so we tend to internalize that. And when it was inflicted, right, especially if it was inflicted in childhood, kids can't take that kind of pain. So when you are made to feel that way by people that are supposed to keep you alive, the brain develops coping skills. And the coping skill that it develops is to numb out that pain. Numb it out, focus on symptoms, focus on the other person, focus on the story, just don't look here. That's what the brain is trying to keep you from doing. So as you're peeling back the layers and you get to this spot where you still want to move forward, but the body knows that we need to feel it to heal it, right? So it's almost like a war inside. You need to feel it to heal it, but your brain's like, no, you can't handle that. So let's just keep on focusing on the other person. The next layer then would be learning how to be comfortable in the discomfort of the emotions that come up in your body. And this is not easy, because your brain remembers it from the perception of, if it happened in childhood, it remembers it from the perception of that child, that this is like a life or death wound. This is so overbearing that it's too much. So you're going to feel it from that level. And in the beginning, it's scary. You know, you want to run from it, or you want to get so busy that you don't notice it. Some people, unfortunately, want to numb it through alcohol or medication. But when we start realizing that this is just the piece of us that's still hurt, but if we can heal this piece, life will be so different. So learning to sit with that emotion, letting it come up. At this stage, something that's really helpful is reparenting, learning how to reparent yourself when those emotions come up. Because if you treat yourself harshly when those intense emotions come up, your brain will numb them out again and will hide them from you and will prevent you from moving forward, because it doesn't feel like those emotions are safe with you. So you actually have to have so much compassion and so much self-love when those emotions show up, if you want to move to the next stage. And that next stage is processing and releasing those stuck emotions that are part of the core wound, okay? And when you do that, what happens is you begin to live life from your authentic self, okay? Because the piece that's wounded, the piece that's been numbed out, is your authentic self. And when you get back in touch with that authentic self, you realize how many years you've been living unconscious. So that's a very quick way of describing the layers of healing. But I do want to say it takes time. This is not something you learn and then in 2 months you're like, I did my core wound and I'm good. If you really want to heal completely, it can take probably, and I'm doing an average here, but it could take probably about a year and a half for you to work through it all. And I'm going to be honest, in my face-to-face coaching, I usually get people that are at different stages of this recovery, right? Or different layers, I should say. And sometimes it's a symptom that someone wants to work on. Sometimes it's a belief. Sometimes they're feeling numb and they want to stop feeling numb. They want to get in touch with that wound. But what I notice about healing is that people will pick at it, they'll see a tiny change, and then they'll stop. And they'll think that everything's fine, only to come back like 6 months later and feel like, they're back at square one. So my advice to you is to find something that helps you to get all the way there. Because if you don't get to the place where your new beliefs are now your default beliefs, where your new empowered emotions and thoughts are now your default emotions and thoughts, your brain will always slip back to what's familiar and what is the default. Which means healing can feel like you're going up a hill and sliding back down and going up a hill again and sliding back down. So find something that you're able to stick with long enough to make the changes stick. And if you need any help in that area, make sure you check out the Thriver School of Transformation, because that's its goal, to help people to work through CPTSD until it sticks, until who you are, your authentic self, is your default self. We meet live weekly so that you have the weekly support, encouragement, and tools necessary. And it's a beautiful community of people from all over the world. So if doing it alone is taking years and you're still not seeing the results, make sure you check out the link in the description below.